Hey guys, Mysterion here. So I thought I would talk about, the state of Victoria. So I live in Victoria, from Melbourne myself. I'm going to talk about the state of Victoria during the pandemic and my overall thoughts on that topic. Please leave your opinions in the comments. I would love to read them. So let's get started. So, oh gosh, I don't remember the date. It was around the, I don't know, 18th of March, basically, that the lockdowns were originally put in place in Victoria. And it's sort of crazy because, like, when I first heard about this virus, I'll be honest, I didn't take it seriously whatsoever. You know, we've had other viruses before this. Ebola, Zika virus, that's the ones that I remember in my lifetime. And honestly, they didn't really impact me very much. We didn't have many cases in Australia. We certainly didn't have a lockdown. And I sort of originally, prior to the lockdown, I wrote this off as just another health scare because that's simply what it was for me personally the two times before with Zika and the Ebola virus, you know. And I remember I went clubbing 5 weeks in a row during that time. I was on my gap year. I was working about 70 hours a week. I was doing all that. Life was good. Life was good. And then all of a sudden, this lockdown happened. And it turned my life personally upside down, as it turns a lot of people's lives upside down. Like I went from 70 hours a week to 5 to none. Like that's how nuts it affected me personally. My overseas trip got cancelled. I couldn't go clubbing anymore. I couldn't see friends anymore. It just completely changed my way of living. Prior to the virus, I was having fun on my gap year before that. Anyway, so that led to us being where we are now. We've had lockdowns go on for it's about 7 months now. Around that time, could be 8 months. Oh, yeah, around 7 months, 6 months. Quite a long time. The fact that I'm losing track of time isn't a good sign, but it's been a long time, okay? And here's my thoughts on it. The lockdown has been beneficial and it's been bad in some ways. Now, I'm personally a centrist, which means that I'm in the middle of what Liberal think and also what Labor think. So, I personally think that the lockdown was beneficial because it enabled us to really get the case numbers down, and it did that so well for a long time. And then we had the debacle with the hotel quarantine going wrong, where we had incompetent security guards sleep with people that should not have left their hotel rooms and should have just been left in there for that 2 week period. But no, the security guards were incompetent, and it caused the second wave of this virus to happen. And that led to tougher restrictions. We had stage 3, and we thought that was the max it was going to go. And then we had stage 4 lockdowns in Victoria. Stage 4 lockdowns, if you're in Victoria, you know what I'm talking about. You couldn't leave your house after 8 p.m. You couldn't see anyone basically. You needed a permit to go to work. Like, it felt like something from 1984. That's what it felt like for me personally, and I'm sure for a lot of people. But here's the thing. I agree that we needed stage 4. Now, I don't agree with every single part of stage 4, but I do agree with the fundamentals of it. So what do I agree with? I agree that we should have permits for things like work during this time. I believe that we should be inside and there should be fines if you do not wear face masks. And the reason I believe that is because, one, with the permits for work, it's limiting movement, which is very important. Because, quite frankly, if we have people going wherever they like, the virus is going to spread more. It's as simple as that. The same thing with the face masks. The face masks have been shown to work very well. There's been varying levels of success depending on what face mask is worn. There is data that shows that the woven face masks, so the ones that you buy, the disposable ones, are one of the most effective. I believe it was the N95 that had the most protection overall, and the mask with the least protection from research that I did was the ones that are like handmade, those type of ones. So I personally stuck with the disposable ones personally, but I think that the face masks were great. You know, it seemed like it was really stopping the spread. You know, we went from 700 cases a day to 50 at the moment around. So it works, right? But the part that I disagree with the lockdown, I disagree that areas that have no coronavirus cases, so particularly I'm talking about parts of regional Victoria here. I'm not talking about the CBD. I'm not talking about major shopping centres like Chadstone or Fountain Gate. I'm talking regional Victoria, places where there has been no cases for a long time. You know, places like Geelong that have had basically no cases. Places like that, I don't see why we can't open up those businesses at least. Now, I think that the case numbers should be practically zero in those areas before we open up business. But areas like that should be running, in my opinion, at least from a business perspective. They shouldn't be allowed to leave their town and go wherever they want. I don't think they should. But they should be allowed to at least open up, because that way we're at least getting the economy going again, which has been one of the biggest things during this coronavirus. You know, we're sort of balancing the economy and people's welfare, and you need to pick which one's more important. And as Daniel Andrews has showed us, he believes that welfare and control over people is more important than the economy. Now, another thing I will say is I don't agree with the protests either. So that's something I agree with Dan Andrews on. I believe that the protests are completely unnecessary. It's not going to lead to anything happening, in my opinion. As you can see, Daniel Andrews has been quite strong in his beliefs. He's not really swayed, despite a lot of the public opinion that's happened against him. You know, things like Dictator Dan, that type of thing. It's not swayed him much. And I think that's a good thing, because during the coronavirus, you have to be tough. You have to be tough on these restrictions. But I think you've also got to be reasonable. So not opening up businesses where there's no cases, I think it's ridiculous. What else I will say is the curfew. I do not see the point of a curfew either. So the curfew originally was said by Daniel Andrews to be in place because of health officer orders, right? But that turned out to be false. So I've done a lot of research pro for lockdown and against lockdown, and I was watching Sky News the other day. And Sky News, some of the stuff I think is ridiculous on there, like stupid, but some of it has a bit of logic behind it too. So it's sort of both sides. But they were talking about how the chief health officer did not approve of the lockdown, and they showed a audio recording of that the health officer indeed did not approve of this lockdown for the curfew. Sorry, the health officer did not approve the curfew. So then the question was, who did approve the curfew? And we saw, I think it was a day ago, the top police officer did not approve the curfew either. So it begs the question, why do we have this curfew? Now, to some capacity, I understand, but I also think it's about reasonableness too. So, as I'm centrist, so I can see both viewpoints, I guess. So, for example, the good thing about having the curfew in place, it limits movement. You're not going to have people going willy-nilly when the police are asleep. You know what I mean? It's that type of thing. And that limits case numbers. But at the same time, most people Young people particularly might go out at this time, but after 8 p.m, most people are going to go to bed. Most people, unless you're under the age of under age of 30, right? They might not go to bed. They might go out and see their friends, and that's the thing. That's the only real issue I see with it. But most people are going to be asleep, which limits the spread once again. So overall, I would say the curfew is necessary because it limits movement, but it is definitely not a decision that I think is easy to make. It does limit freedom, as this entire lockdown has done, but I believe that it's beneficial if it limits movement. However, because it's not approved by the health officer, what I think the best thing to do would be to ask the health officer, hey, is this a good thing that we're doing? Is this actually limiting the number of cases in Victoria? If it's not, we should remove the curfew. But if it is, we should keep the curfew. And in regards to a solution to this virus, there really isn't one at this point in time that will satisfy everyone. And that's the real issue, because you have people on one side who say the lockdown is good, the Labor, mostly Labor. They say that, the lockdown is good, Daniel Andrews is protecting us, all this, right? And then you have people on the other side who are saying it's a breach of human rights and things like this. And you know what? They're right. It is a breach of human rights. But I would say that, it's necessary, at least in my opinion, it's necessary to have your human rights breached in crisis if it leads to protection overall. Because, I think the point is that you need to protect the country and protect your state. And that's why I believe that, yes, it is infringing upon human rights, but it is necessary. Anyway, that's just a few of my thoughts on the current state of Victoria as a result of these lockdowns. I'm in the middle on this one personally. I see some of the things that, people are saying that it's bad for the economy and things like that. But at the same time, this stage 4 is working. So I'm in the middle on this one personally. Let me know your beliefs in the comments. Please like, share, subscribe. Hope you have a great one.